Hello. Can y'all see me? Hey, Bruce, can you see me?
Got you.
Oh, perfect, perfect. How you feeling, brother? Good morning.
All right. Just doing everything we got to do.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. You in the crib right now?
In the basement, desk over here, records behind me.
Nice. All right. So Cam is also working with us. I'm sure you know through Roy Hargrove Big Band, y'all always.
Sure.
Yeah. So it's recording already, Cam? It looks like it actually.
Yes.
Just double checking.
Hello, 1, 2. There we go. Yeah, it's on for you guys, and I got it on my end too, so we're good.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And don't mind.
All right. All right. So welcome to In the Shed. It's my honor to have the great Bruce Williams with us. I've been knowing Bruce Williams for a long time now. He's been a teacher of mine, also one of the guys that was a coach ensemble of mine at the Juilliard School, and he's also just a great musician. I grew up watching him play with Roy Hargrove and many other great musicians, throughout the New York scene, and he right now is actually one of the head members of the Roy Hargrove Big Band that happens every month at the Jazz Gallery. And so it's my pleasure to introduce Bruce Williams, man. How you doing?
Very good. Thank you, Gifton. Yes, it's a pleasure to be here with you today.
Oh man, it's great. It's great to have you here. It's interesting because we've had a group of guests that have made its way to the In the Shed. But it's great when I get like most of the people that we've had, like Willie Jones, Justin Robinson, are like part of the Roy fam. So it feels good to just have family, on here, man.
Yeah, we're family for sure. We all spent many years with Roy in various configurations, and my role with the big band is leading the big band and trying to keep it as real and as live as possible, as if he was still there. The best we can, and trying to have as many, alumni, former members to contribute and to play in the band as we possibly can, and then also the strong enthusiasts and people like the young man Cameron Alforky, who's come up, stepped up, and a few others, that like Roy would really have loved him,
Exactly.
So it's really important to try to keep legacy alive. Just like there's a Basie band, there's an Ellington band, there's a Lionel Hampton band, there's a Stan Kenton and Woody Herman. These bands come back up, Glenn Miller Orchestra. In some capacity, they're all still working. Why not Roy? Why not Roy?
Exactly. Honestly, when you talk about compositions and the understanding of the big band, like Roy was someone to me that was, the people always like to think of him like also having a huge influence. One of his huge influence being like Dizzy Gillespie, and that understanding, and coming from that school. And I think for him, he was somebody that brought or bridged the gap between generations. You look at the old school of big band writing, and then you look at the new school of big band writing. Look at the old school of jazz. Look at the new school of what was happening on later on. He was the one that kind of bridged everything together, and to have a big band version of that, that's like gold. So it's so beautiful you guys are doing that.
Absolutely, because I mean, I look at the band in a couple segments. There was the 1.0 that was largely an experiment, and they did a couple gigs. And then there's like the 1A, like when the band started to shift with personnel and have a different kind of personality. So I was kind of in the 1A section, and then the 2.0, which was what we developed and kept moving on with until we recorded, because we traveled a lot. In the 1A, I would say at the time, Sherman Irby was playing lead and I was playing second. And then soon after that, I ended up playing in the quintet. So all of our relationship with Roy, like, really played a big role into, like, who played in the band, the roles they played in the band, and the understanding of like his writing and style, and making the music be as memorable as possible.
It's interesting now that we, start off on this talk about Roy and his big band and his legacy. I wanted to even talk about that September Nareen, right? And that video, and also just that music in general. I know that that album is an amazing album. He has a lot of his, compositions on there, and that was recorded at Capitol
Yeah,
Studio.
that's right, Capitol in LA.
How was that?
It was a great experience because it's a studio you always have heard about, like legendary. Like, it's legendary in some ways, like going to Van Gelders, but more for like pop music and bigger projects and stuff like that. So to be there with the great Al Schmidt, engineering is amazing. And the respect the studio had and Al had for Roy and for what we were trying to do, right off the bat, I said, man, this is really incredible, because we also did the Hollywood Bowl during that run.
Yep.
And the record became Grammy nominated and everything. We should have won. I don't know what was up with that,
What was up with
but
that?
I have no idea. But yeah, you know, to record there and record with Roy and see his poise and control in the studio over something, because on the record he didn't play that much. On the gig he didn't play that much because he was conducting. When he played, everybody knew. He didn't have to play to be a personality. He was already a personality. He was already a figure. Just his presence on the bandstand meant so much. Much like, like you said, an extension of Dizzy. Dizzy didn't have to play that much. But when he did, it was like, oh, there's Dizzy. Same with Roy. There's Roy. Not to say that they're the same, but like there is sort of a connection and parallel, from a younger person looking up to somebody that great, because most of us, I would say, had met Dizzy at least once or been around him at least once. And I think Roy more than that, honestly. I met Dizzy the first time I came to New York. That's the story I'll have to tell you about off camera. But
Mhm.
but yeah, I mean, but that extension is, you're right. It's real.
Oh man, absolutely. And I'd like to even, take it a little further because even today, this is one special arrangement that Roy did of "Jesus Loves Me" that the saxophone versions do usually at the Royal Hargrove. And if you want to hear that, you got to go to the show and see it live. And that's just such a special thing. And you're the one that's leading it. I just want you to talk a little bit about that. You know.
Well, it's a like a hymn, a spiritual, and it's the last thing I remember him writing for us. There was an accompaniment of bass and saxophones, but when you play it without the bass, you don't need it. You just the saxophones as like a saxophone choir. And Roy comes from a somewhat religious background, being from Texas, probably Southern Baptist, but Christian, but then he also had conversations about Islam, conversations about Buddhism. So he was a very spiritually aware individual. He wasn't closed that way. So he just was digging back into his roots and, like, how his mama raised him. And he wrote that, and I mean, I could see tears in his eyes when we played it. And we all get choked up playing it because we know what it meant to him and what it means to us, what it means to the Black experience to talk in that term, Jesus loves me. Regardless of your religious persuasion, you know what that sentiment means coming from our struggle to modern day.
Beautifully said, man. It's beautifully said, man. I second that a lot. And it's something about church musicians, right? Musicians that come from the church. It happens a lot in jazz where you find that musicians that transition from a church background into the jazz background, just such an easy transition because it seems like it's a similar sort of expression. I want you to talk a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, I see that because they get so much early training just trying to play, trying to figure things out. Either looking through the hymnals or playing by ear, and just the trial and error, and then the success of actual performing on the Sunday or actually playing for a revival. It's the same with like garage band R&B musicians. Like the trial and error, just constantly I'm trying to get to this. I'm trying to emulate from the church to the garage band kind of church musician, a garage band kind of R&B or funk musician. It's that rote learning and the stuff that sticks with you for such a long time. So when you try other musical styles, you've already had the reps put in to go ahead and play and express yourself. You're not afraid to express yourself. You're not afraid of groove. You're not afraid of soul. You're not afraid of exposing your heart within the context of whatever you're doing.
Exactly. Do you have a list, or I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you have a list of musicians you can think of that were from the church background and the jazz?
I think Robert Glasper. I think Shedrick Mitchell. Some very spiritually aware people like Jason Thomas, JT from RH Factor. Yeah, I mean, so many. I would have to really scratch my head, but there's so many. There's so many. Where even Jason Marshall. You know, it's just a thing in the community. Like you want to play music, that's one of the first places you go, rather than a music studio where you're taking a half-hour lesson. They just have somebody at church or in the neighborhood who starts you off, who helps you. Like my background is more from the R&B side because my brother had a huge record collection, and I would just hear all that stuff. But then my mom, she would be playing Mahalia Jackson and Staple Singers and Jerry Butler and Johnny Mathis, Al Green. So I heard like gospel and going into pop music a lot at home from them, and some jazz, but not like super straight ahead, like early Ramsey Lewis and things like that. So the groove was always there, the sense of home, the spirit was always there. So I look at it kind of in a similar way, like when you're just getting it from home, like church is home, and those bands, like I grew up playing, DC go-go bands, and there's no written music. A lot of times in church, there's no written music. I have the benefit and luxury of being able to read and being trained to do so. Um, but a lot of gigs I've had to just open my ear and just figure out what's going on, taking stuff off the record or just learn it and have to play it later on that day. And that's what a lot of church musicians and R&B musicians get. And when they transition to jazz, that's still a part of who they are.
Oh, beautifully said, man. Beautifully said. And that, I think that takes us to our next point, because similar to you, Roy had a similar background in terms of being from the church, but then, having his dad being someone that was, always playing records in the house of all types of music. And even the band that you are part of, RH Factor, is a connection to that, and him coming, getting closer to his roots, from the church, but also his R&B influence and making that band RH Factor. And so I wanted to hear a little bit about that and connect that to RH Factor, et cetera, because you've been a long-standing member of that band, and literally that band also influenced a generation. Robert Glasper, we can talk about that as well.
Yeah, with that band, you have people of various backgrounds. and different levels of influence. Like some of us more straight ahead, but like we like R&B and fusion. Some of us are more funk and R&B, or gospel and R&B, or blues and funk and pop music and soul, but all jazz influenced, all jazz influenced. And that made the glue. That made the glue for all of us. And being strong improvisers and listening to the music with an open mind made RH Factors a success, because it could have been just a very rigid band, we're just playing our parts, just playing pocket. Nothing against, like, the times I've heard like a Kool and the Gang or something like that. It could have been just straight up like kind of trying to be like the record and not vary that much from it. But this band had elasticity. I mean, I remember a time when Roy was playing with Herbie. During that time, he was playing with Herbie and Michael Brecker. Roy came back more open, like way more open. And he knew about my time playing avant-garde music with the World Sax Quartet. So over the groove, we started stretching boundaries and going different places in the music that was very organic. I hate to use that word, but organic, very natural, and really interesting. I mean, I can't explain it any other way other than like it was open. But the musicians behind us supporting us, the whole band, they were there with us, right along with us. And that's not their forte, but because they listened to all kinds of stuff, they've been exposed, they were willing to participate and allow us to get to a place. And with RH Factor, we could always get to a magical place, tune to tune, night to night, from the pocket to the danceable stuff to more heady, intellectual kind of things. And it was always just like a trip, man, like a great dream, a great ride to be on, from night to night.
And so, how long were you apart, and when did you join that band?
I think I joined in like 2005. So the band had already been established, had a couple records out, and he had initially said he was going to call me for it, but whatever happens, and at the time when we hooked back up, because I was in the quintet for a short time, about 7 months, did
Mm,
the big band before that, and then I got busy. During the time I was playing with the quintet, I was playing with the Count Basie Orchestra and the World Sax Quartet at the same time. So I was juggling all three brains exactly at the same time.
wow.
And then when I stopped playing with the quintet, I just went off doing these other things. He saw me in Europe playing with Ben Riley, Monk's drummer, the famous drummer in the Ben Riley Monk Legacy Septet. We happened to be at the same hotel, and so we got to talking and hanging out. And I went to go see them play, and I think they saw us play too. And I said, "Man, what happened? I thought you calling me for the thing, man." He's like, "Oh man, yeah, yeah, okay, all right, you know." Next thing you know, the phone rings.
Mm,
Like some weeks or a month or so later, and that was that, you know, and that was up until his passing,
mm.
and I think my presence also helped the resurgence of the big band and stock in the big band, because I was Frank Foster's lead alto player for 15 years when
Mm.
Frank Foster in the Loud Minority. So he knew I had the skills he knew about, but then the other ones I've acquired, and he liked to utilize people in multiple disciplines, you know.
Yeah, similar to how John Batiste played in his quintet and also the RH Factor as well.
Yeah, he did. Like a lot of times, see, because John is rather versatile. He could play some classical piano, then he can play groove and pop music, but he can play jazz. And he wasn't afraid of keyboards. And he wasn't afraid of playing in the pocket. He had a great ear. Some piano players really don't like to touch a keyboard, but he wasn't one like that.
Mm. And I think this is a great connection we're making because you're originally from DC, right?
Yeah.
And so I wanted to also touch on that. I want to touch on how Roy, a lot of his, band members, for some reason they all came from that area. And I wanted you to talk a little bit about that as well.
It's funny, man, because if you go back to the early days of Roy's career, there was obviously Antonio Hart from Baltimore, and then Mark Carey from DC. And that whole what they call now the DMV, you know, we all had friends in other areas, but we never called it that. That's like a pretty recent phenomenon, DC, Maryland, Virginia. But if you really get down to it, he wasn't really dealing with the V, he was dealing with the D and the M, DC and Maryland. I hate to put it that way, but that's the truth. Um, both my parents are Virginians, so I'm kind of honorary that way. But um, my upbringing is DC and Maryland. So he even had, you know, Mike Bowie was supposed to play. Even, you know, Larry Willis moved to Baltimore. You know, Amin Salim, DC. You know, myself, Jason Marshall from the DMV, Quincy from Baltimore. You know, I got a short list, but like if you think about it, he picked more musicians from the DC, Maryland area than anywhere else in the country. He just happened to. He loved DC. He loved go-go. He loved that vibe. And as you know, it's not far from New York. You know, I often tell people that DC, because of the social structure, especially for African Americans, it's like Harlem South, New Orleans North, because you got Second Line and things like that in New Orleans. Well, we got go-go. Well, they had, you know, the Harlem Renaissance and like the nightclubs where people went. Well, we had the U Street Corridor and the Howard Theater. You know, so it kind of met in between, you know, especially when you start talking about the 95, I-95 corridor and what was the Chitlin circuit. Like, you know, you go from New York, and you go down and you maybe hit Camden or Trenton, and you go to Philly, and from there, you go to Baltimore and hit DC. And within a phone call, if your band wasn't popping, somebody would know in the next town before you got there. You know what I mean? So,
Right.
so we have that connection that way, going all the way back down. And the groove, like the DC's hometown groove, go-go music. It's an indigenous funk to that area, like playing the Second Line and, you know, certain like boogaloo things that we learned from coming out of, you know, New Orleans. That's from there. And they're both unique to each area, and they both are very African representative. You know, so being that they both have a large, you know, African American populace, it's kind of unique. You know, they both are very percussive, danceable, and have a history.
Mm. And making me think of groove, you know,
Oh yeah.
making me think that Roy, he absolutely looked for musicians that understood that at a deep level.
You know, he used to like to play close your eyes, close the do that, right? But he would like it in a pocket. And he would do it every once in a while, you know, and we were at the New Morning in France, and JT loved go-go, even though he's from Texas. I mean, he even went to a go-go because he just had to hear it for himself.
Ah,
So he would talk to me about it all the time. And I asked the sound man, "Hey man, you got a cowbell?" "Oh yeah." He gives me the cowbell and the stick, and I started playing the beat, and Roy lost his mind. You know, so I kept the cowbell. I still have it around here somewhere. And man, I still have that cowbell from that tour from that time.
mm.
And he would say, "Man, you got the cowbell?" You know, so I bring it on stage, you know, and I start playing the pattern, you know. But he loved it. He just loved it.
Oh man.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting because I think that it's good, you know, that you're such a versatile musician and someone that has like many skill sets. And I remember for a lot of people too, on top of, you know, the big band stuff, on top of the RH Factor stuff, but also that short stint you had with the War Hargrove Quintet. I saw this Newport video where y'all played Mr. Magic, you know, and Carrieisms.
Yeah, carryisms. Yeah.
Oh yeah, Carrieism slash, yeah. I don't, it's not.
It's just that Willis played that Mr. Magic kind of vamp over it.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
But people are gonna know exactly which video I'm talking about because of
Right.
that. And that concert as well, y'all played Wisdom to Bryce
And
by by
depth is on there
Dep
somewhere too.
as well. Yeah. And that's just a great band, you know, with Willie Jones, Cheryl Cannon, Larry Willis, yourself, and Roy. And that's like young Roy. You know, I mean, I just remember that, and that's I think that was the time where he also made the interview. Did he do an interview? I think that might have been a different
He did
concert.
he did an interview during that because that was a PBS special that they recorded of Newport.
Got you.
And the two main people I remember speaking all the time was Roy and Dave Brubeck. And so yeah, Roy was speaking quite a bit in between our performance, like they would like pan to this and pan to that.
Wow.
During that time, we had gone out of town and done different things, and you know, it just personnel change, you know, personnel change, whatever, you know.
Anything memorable from that time period as well?
Yeah, at first it was hard because he didn't give you any music. So like you had to figure out what it was. Even if you went to a gig of his to hear him maybe even 2 nights before, you wouldn't really know what he was going to do. So I was scrambling, transcribing, and asking for stuff. Gerald Cannon gave me a few things. And, it took me a minute to try to get it together because it would change so often, you know. But about that time, I kind of had it pretty much where he wanted it. But, stuff changed, It was challenging, but, it was fun too. He liked to play, he liked to go out to jam sessions, like on the road. Um, yeah, it was just a good time. It was a lot of time for growth for everybody. Everybody was moving and grooving. Because he used to see me play at Smalls way back in mid '90s. I ran a session from 2 in the morning to 7 in the morning. Yeah, on a Thursday night, and he would show up, so we would play there. So I
Mm.
said, yo, man, I'm gonna play with you one day. He's like, okay, all right, And I asked him about depth, and he sat down and wrote a chart out for depth and gave it to me.
Mm.
And so next thing you know, Sherman was like, man, you're next, you're next. I said, what is next, man? next for what are you talking about? Then I was next. so whatever that means.
Absolutely. No, man. I love that video. And I think that takes us to another point too, because I actually absolutely want to get, to some more stuff in terms of what you're doing currently. But I just want to, you mentioned something about Smalls and how you hosted a session from 2 to 7.
Yeah.
Like, what was Smalls like back then, man? Because when I was around Roy, he talked a lot about that kind of culture and how people, the sessions, and how Bradley's and, you know, clubs like that where they just went so, later into the night and people were playing, and just wanted to know a little bit about that
It was
before we
vibrant.
move.
It was really vibrant, and a lot of young players were out hanging, or younger musicians coming from out of town knew that was the place to go to find as close to the Bradley's vibe, but within your age group, you know.
Mm.
And we be hitting, man, just hitting and going hard. I mean, sometimes I think we played too long, but everybody's stretching, trying to get their muscle up, trying to get to that next thing, and it was great, man. Sherman had a night, alto player Brad Lely had a night, different people. I think Jason Lidner ended up having his own like version of a big band there. It was really awesome. Actually, we all grew into different. That's why I really always like if Spike asked me to do a gig or whatever, because that was a place where I grew. I grew a lot. I mean, a lot. I mean, I just shedded a lot during the day and then went down there at night, and try to execute what I've been shedding and get it together. The whole scene was like Seventh Avenue was really different, because you could walk from the Vanguard to Smalls and go down to Sweet Basil's, which is not there anymore. And there was a club across the street for a short period of time where that Starbucks is. Then you can go over Sixth Avenue to the Blue Note, and then Vigione's was at the corner, right across from Ben's Pizza. Yeah, and then you could go hear some rock and or blues around the corner at like what's the name of that spot? Couple blocks away, and then the Zinc Bar was on Houston, but now not where it is now. It was on Houston, so we could walk around. Cornelia Street was in between a bunch of stuff. We could go somebody's at Cornelia Street. then walk on the other side of the park, go to Bradley's and the Knickerbocker and different places. You could walk. I remember one night, man, it was like Piano Fest. I think it was like uh, Walter Bishop, Barry Harris, and I think Mayburn were all playing at the same time. And you could walk to hear each one and get a taste of everybody. Like it was crazy. It was crazy. Like it was like Piano Central that night.
Wow.
Like some of the greatest piano players around. You could go hear them.
And what time frame was this?
That was the early mid '90s, man.
Mm,
Early, something like that. Um, it was crazy.
wow.
It'd be nothing like the bump into George Cables and then Mayburn, you know, and then Kenny Barron at Bradley's, or John Hicks at Bradley's. Be nothing, you know. Bradley's was the biggest trip because there's always like this big dude that was at the door trying not to let people in or intimidate young cats. But you would get in, you buy your little soda, whatever, sit at the bar just to be in the room, to be around it.
Mm,
There was some magical times, man, some very special times.
wow, man. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that. We all need to know, you know, what created the room for, what jazz is today.
Hmm.
Uh, I guess I usually start with this question, but I just love the way we started when we talked about Roy and went through this whole journey. But this is in the shed, right? And we like to figure out from most of our guests, like, how do you shed? How you shed, man?
Right now, it's to find the correct time instead of just dealing with maintenance. But I like to just kind of really focus on my sound, focus on my articulation, reading through etudes and stuff like this, stuff that's not necessarily jazz centric. Because I feel like once I have all that going, I can play almost whatever I want to play. You know, the instrument is, this is not really the best way to say it, but more or less at my will. I can kind of do what almost what I hear to do, and I try to really connect that way first. And then after that, it's like a little time at the keyboard, just playing two fives or working on one sound at a time, like really getting inside of one sound. Um, you know, trying to hear a little better every day, or try to feel a little better every day through the shed. I mean, I spend a lot of time, like from teaching, trying to reinforce what I do with them. So talking saxophone, Close 25 daily etudes, Sigurd Rascher 158, some Marcel Mule, some Brubank selected studies. I got this book a while back of Bach cello suites for saxophone. Things like that, just to try to just keep your muscle up. Sight reading things. Never playing anything too fast, like never.
Mm,
Because I want to get the most out of every note. I want each note to be as full and as clear and as in tune as I can make it. Because, like you said, versatility. I'm in so many different situations. I have to have that skill set available to me, to be able to like move between here and there, you know, saxophonically, like, thinking about slotting my notes. Like you play the trumpet, Cameron plays the trumpet. I'm always thinking about in my upper register, slotting my notes like you guys have to slot the notes for the trumpet, because I profess that after you get to the certain part of the saxophone, it's a trumpet.
mm,
You got to hear those notes. You got to start to hear how the stuff goes intervallically. This shouldn't be much guesswork. You got to spend that time there. And so my shed time is really around a lot of that stuff. Then I go through periods where I'm like working on a tune or tunes or transcribing, and with transcribing, I rarely transcribe like the whole solo. It's like I'm working on something. I said, what was that? Or I'm having issues with something. Let me center in on like what did they do on the bridge, or what was that cadenza, you know, or what was that passage? You know, I mean, I'm thinking about things like that. Transcribing for me is really heavy listening. You know, a lot of concrete listening, like where I'm listening to something over and over and over for days, you know, to the point where I can sing it. I know the other parts. And a lot of times if I listen like that, if I just really hone in, I could pick up my horn and pretty much play about like 75, 80% of the solo without having to um, you know, really dig in. I'll just put the record on and play. And I actually will catch most of it. You know what I mean? And then you go back and try to, you know, refine it and get it better. I don't like to transcribe to the point where I'm a total mimic. I like to transcribe like the vibe as well as the information because there's nothing without the vibe, you know. Um, with my students, I like to also make them versatile in that how does this one articulate? How does that one articulate? You know, how do they use, you know, vibrato? Like I call it, you know, the forensics DNA of a player. You know, where does Train start and end his vibrato versus Cannonball versus Jackie McLean versus Bird versus Stitt? You know what I mean? You know, versus Phil Woods versus Michael Brecker versus this one. How do they do it? Can you describe it? Can you imitate it? Can you assimilate it to the point where you have an amalgamation of sorts to be able to bring it out for yourself? So in my shed time, I still think about some of the things I have to profess, you know, because you got to stay on top of your stuff to a degree to, you know, to give back. Today I'm going to be shedding some of Buster Williams music because we start a 4-night stint at Smoke
Oh man, when is that actually?
tonight through Sunday.
Oh, I come back on Saturday. Maybe I can catch some of that.
Yeah, you know, and got a new record out with Buster. His record is called Unalome, and
Mm.
I'm looking through that and hooking up my reeds because it's just got warm out, you know, so the reeds are gonna be tripping again, you know, and you know about practicing. I try not to spend too much time working on like my reeds and stuff. I let that be a separate time from practicing, you know,
Mm.
because that could take up too much of your time, you know, fiddling around with that stuff. Like get that set up, and then go ahead and go in the shed, you know,
Yeah.
hit those long tones and intervals when you got a good read.
Oh man. Uh, I love the way you were pinpointing like the musical DNA of different players. And I would like to know, how do you go about integrating, all of the musicians that you're influenced by? And I'd like to hear maybe a list of some of the musicians you are influenced by, and how do you integrate that into your playing?
Certain tunes to me, even if it's not the tune that they played, um, will remind me of that particular player that I heard that quality in. Like short, poppy, energetic stuff always reminds me of Cannonball. You know, more fluid and singing qualities always remind me of Train. Like if he's playing like medium tempos and ballads, he's playing faster. You know, I hear that quality. A more vocal approach that's patient with a hard middle to it. Um, I hear Bart's more of a vinegary kind of texture that still has great articulation and heavy swing, like the best quarter note to eighth note ratio. When I hear that something's in the pocket, man, I hear Jackie McLean. You know, laying back, I hear Dexter, but I hear Dexter in a different way, not like typical like people laying back like a Van Webster or Coleman Hawkins, but like just more relaxed, you know. And I feel like I tried to imitate parts of tunes or solos over the years that exemplifies those different characteristics. Like like Cannonball, like He plays but beep 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 da 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 do 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 but beep beep da 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 do do do, you know, playing toy. That's that articulation thing. So when I go back to the books and stuff I'm talking about in etudes, what do you take from those books that apply to your jazz playing? Because when I'm not trying to be a classical saxophone player. Yeah, I've done a recital before, but that was so long ago it doesn't even count. But it's like, how do you take that information and then turn it into what you need for the gig? Particularly, you know, today the rigors of the music could be all over the place. You know, um, let's face it, not everybody trying to play this music is going to play this music. You know, sometimes they got to do what they got to do. So it might be a Broadway show or play with the circus, play on the street, or play at the Vanguard. You don't know what the music, the conductor, the arranger, or composer is going to ask of you. So you need to develop a wide palette of colors for tone and articulation to express yourself and give the music what it's looking for. That's kind of how I've done it over the years. You know, I don't tongue so well. I don't phrase this well. I'm too tight about this. I listen to people to play more free and loose, but still they're playing great. They're playing the changes, you know, like more elusive players, man, you know, Bartz, James Spalding, Wayne Shorter, Charles Lloyd, you know, they're very snaky, you know, in their approach. You know, somebody who just lays it out 100%, Hank Mobley, Sonny Stitt, Dexter, you know, uh, who's kind of a combination of both, Jackie, you know, to me. And then like the other side of my playing, the more free, the real free side of my playing, man, it's totally coming out of Oliver Lake and you know, my man Arthur Blythe. You know, those sounds are way in my ear, you know, Sonny Simmons, you know, those kinds of players. That Eric Dolphy record, Iron Man, you know, I think it's got Sonny Simmons and Prince Lasha on there also, like playing some alto clarinet and stuff. That that sound is in there too, because you may need that. You may need that. You know, I look at the music, man, like it's a big continuum, regardless of what you say, you know, because everybody should be able to play the blues, not a blues, the blues. You know, so they should be represented in their music. So we go back to talking about the R&B or the church musician, it's still rooted in the blues, the feeling, the experience. And so from the avant-garde guy to the hard bop, bebop guy to the pop guy, I still just hear it as a continuum. I don't have so many biases about is this or is that. Now I know when it's not swinging, I have a problem with that. If it's supposed to be and it's not. But if it's supposed to be, you know, hip and modern, I mean, okay, I'll check it out. It's supposed to be free. Okay, I'll check it out. I don't really have any you know, bias about it that way, you know.
That's an amazing way to look at it because it is coming from one, you know, place in terms of the blues. You think about it, it's like, yeah, where did you know where did it originate from? And then you know you think of that, you think of it like a tree, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I heard Oliver Lake years ago, man. I wasn't even that involved, but I heard him play a jazz festival in DC. I think the rhythm section was Billy Hart, Rufus Reed, and George Cables. And the singer was Leon Thomas. Wallace Roney was up there, and so was the young alto player at the time, Christopher Holiday. I think he's in like San Diego now. They played a blues in a not so conventional bebop key. It wasn't F, it wasn't B flat, it wasn't C. It might have been like D flat or A flat or something like that, which, you know, like Roadhouse, real blues, soulful, you know, warm keys. But if you're coming up just playing jazz from a school perspective, you're probably gonna play the blues in about 3 keys until you're forced to do it in another. And man, you know, Wallace is Wallace, you know, incredible, you know. But and this is nothing against Christopher Holiday, but like he played well, but it wasn't what Oliver Lake played, who is not known for being a bebop player. He played some stuff, man, that I will never forget. Like it was like so in the moment, so right, so authentic, so connected to the style. It was just the blues, you know. It was just right. There was nothing else I could say was that was the gospel. That was it. It was just nothing but the truth, you know.
Mm.
And that's not a person who's like, you know, straight ahead oriented all the time, you know. Although he loves Jackie, but he really loves, you know, Eric Dolphy and his friend Julius Hemphill, you know. But it was none of that. It was just Oliver playing the blues, you know. I mean, it was greatness. Like at that moment, I said, "Wow, okay, so that's what it really is." That was one of the defining moments for me. That all the biases and judgment and everything, what was starting to build up was erased. And that was like 1989 or 88. I was like, oh, well, that's got to go because he just did it, you know, because I was aware of the World Sax Quartet and Julius Henfield's stuff like Long Tongues and David Murray. I was aware, you know, I had a friend that made me aware of that stuff, you know. And I said, well, that's that. I mean, I would even go out, you know, to go hear things by myself, you know. I went to go hear Sweet Honey in the Rocks, Toshi Regan, you know, I just go, you know, because I want to experience something, you know. At this point, it's not just about this category or that category. I just want to experience something, something I feel is great, something that's moving. You know, what can I take from that to bring to my own experience?
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. A universal look on music is what we all need. Like we need to come to most musical situations without any preconceived notions, because then we get to enjoy the experience for what it is, you know.
You can't learn otherwise if you just come in thinking that you are the king. I mean, that's kind of the main reason why us jazz musicians get pissed off when people say, "Oh, you play legit," like jazz is illegitimate.
Mm.
You know, it's honestly, man, it's bigoted. You know what I'm saying? It's like it legit. I mean, there's rules and things we follow in jazz, except we know that we can stretch a rubber band. Otherwise, it wouldn't be jazz. You know, so I really don't like that. I don't even like it when you get jazz musicians that are like, you know, for lack of a better term, I've heard this used before, like bebop Nazis. You know, I don't really like that. You know, it's like you can be diehard about what you're about, but you got to realize the music kept moving. It's still connected to a few core elements, and people have a right to express themselves the way they're going to express themselves. If you don't like it, don't deal with it. But you don't have to beat them up, slander them, or have an attitude. You know, you ever have a friend that really can't play, like they don't play that well,
Hmm.
but they're your friend. You still got to be a human. They're just your friend, you know, and you can support them in what they're doing in their efforts, but they're still your friend. Now, if you just say you're not going to be friends with them because they don't play the way you want them to play, that's not cool.
Yeah, absolutely not. And
Yeah.
that's where, that's where the we have to make a separation between the music and us as people too.
It's supposed to be a reflection of humanity if we could really like open our eyes a little bit. You know, we got to tell the truth about the history and the origins and, you know, innovation and all of that. We can't just like claim and co-opt stuff without doing that. But we also have to be a little bit more, you know, informed about humanity. You know, just we really should be a little bit more informed about humanity.
Mm. That's what we all need to hear right now,
Yeah.
literally. Uh, man, that was such man. This has been like one of the most flowing interviews. We just went from one place to the next, one place. I love it, and it's like, and I think that's the good thing is when you have these conversations with people that you already have a good connection with. I feel like it's just easy to talk and talk about a lot of different topics.
Mhm.
Um, at this point, I just want to really like, talk about, the music that you got going on right now. So whatever records you got coming up. I know the one with Buster is coming. Do you have anything as a leader that you have out coming up as well? I'd like
I
to know
just
about.
I just recorded I guess it's almost maybe a month ago on Willie Jones's label. My
Mm,
latest thing with Willie Jones producing and playing drums, Brandon McCune on piano, and Lonnie Plaxico on bass.
nice.
So, it's there's some contemplative things on there also because the day of the date I got rear-ended. I was on the Garden State Parkway in Jersey at a dead stop, and the guy hit me in the back.
What?
So I was shaken up and I was still kind of dealing with that. So I'm gonna go ahead and do this recording. I'm gonna just get it done. And in spite of it all, it turned out to be pretty cool.
That's a
And
story to tell, though, right?
yeah, and there's a couple things on there that had me thinking about my best friend that passed during COVID. So there's a couple things that like kind of loose dedications, to him. Some of y'all may know him. We call him Kingfish, Howard
Yes,
Franklin Jr., the drummer.
yes. I'm at Kingfish. Yeah.
Yeah. So we were best friends since we were 12 years old until he passed. And so there's a couple things, loose dedication. One or two things I had recorded but never released, so I re-recorded them just for this particular situation, and there's some new things. You know, I like it. I like it.
There we go.
I
There we
mean,
go.
it's not super like aggressive. Like I've had recordings that have been very aggressive. It's not that way. I think people would like it. I'm starting to think more in terms of like, the public liking the music more than jazz musicians liking the music. You
Mm,
know, I've been pushing myself towards that for several years with other people's recordings as a side man. I used to get in the studio and play like it was a gig, and you really can't do that, and you can't do it for so long because it just you burn it out.
mm.
So, records like Steve Teray Spirit Man, I just really backed off. But still, you don't lose your identity. I just really, and I did the same thing with Buster's record and several other people's recordings. Um, just to still represent, because sometimes the jazz public, they can't accept that much heat right away. They can accept it live, but not on a recording.
Mm.
That's been my experience. You know, if it's a live recording and they know it's a live gig, that's different. But if it's a studio recording, I've chosen to kind of temper things a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. Absolutely, man.
So I think that's coming out from what Willie said, probably in the fall. You know,
Oh, perfect.
you know. Um, I have some things in the can that I've never released. I'm thinking about, man, honestly, just putting some artwork on them, putting them out on Bandcamp, and just let them work themselves without me having my hands on them.
Mm. Right,
You
right,
know,
right. Oh man, that's. I'm definitely gonna link everybody on the platform to when that stuff comes out. We're gonna, post it on there. We're gonna have now that we got that out of the way. I was gonna also send you a link to join in the shed as well while I was on here. And if you need me to help you like set it up, I can, do that like for you. I'm gonna text it to you right now.
okay.
Uh, but man, that was amazing, brother. That was woo. You hit some points, man. People, people need to hear it. They need to hear that, that side of the information too, you know.
I mean, a lot of what I'm talking about, man, I had like a lot of really good teachers and mentors, and I'll be honest with you, it's been a struggle for me for years to accept that I'm kind of in this educational position as well as player's position.
Mm,
Because for as much as I play, still educate a lot.
Yeah.
And I remember, working with Jerry Allen, and she said, look, don't ever be ashamed of the fact that you know how to teach, that you're an educator. That's a very noble and honorable place to be. And
Mm.
she says, everybody knows you can play, but not everybody can deliver, can teach that way, can, like, help people. That's a gift, and I just said, okay, all right, yes, ma'am. I just, all right, I let it go, I mean, because some days I would get frustrated about the amount of phone calls and text messages and emails about, can they get a lesson, or they want to come around, or it's like, I'd rather, like, about half of that just be a gig. And the thing is, I'm not complaining about gigging, because I'm gigging, but
Exactly.
and then teaching at all the different institutions, you get into a certain place. And I learned from, like, some really great players that happen to be great educators. Like, speaking of your instrument, I studied for a while with the trumpet player Webster Young.
Mm.
So, Webster recorded with Train and Jackie McLean, and that was one of my improv teachers, and Calvin Jones at UDC that played with Ray Charles. He came up during that same time with Mayburn and George Coleman and them down there in Memphis. He's a product of that. And then playing all the years with Stanley Cowell, who's a great educator, great mentor. I mean, Stanley was in my life, man, since 21 or something like that, or 22, all up until he passed, and playing gigs and recording with him, traveling with him, doing things with Stanley. You know, those three gentlemen were formal educators in a sense, you know, and I learned a lot on the bandstand with Stanley, classroom with Calvin Jones at Webster's house. But, like, one of the greatest educations ever was 15 years with Frank Foster playing lead alto.
Mm.
Because
Mm.
my saxophone teacher, Dr. Leroy Barton, God rest his soul, um, was the lead alto player in the live minority before me, and I didn't put two and two together when Frank asked me to do the gig, and then I ended up talking to him about it. Leroy Barton was my teacher. He goes, yeah, I know. He's like, sit down, sit down, sit down.
So he was
So
very well intentioned. Very
yes,
well. Yeah.
right. So, like, I mean, I have a lineage and a history. I mean, the time I spent with, like, Jackie McLean was really one time at his house and several times in public, but phone calls and different things he would say to me, that I learned that way, because he knew I was, like, transcribing and mimicking, like, a lot. He could hear that,
Mm.
so he always called me a student abroad and one of his kids. I didn't go to Hart School, although I auditioned,
Mm.
and he was expecting to have me come, but my head wasn't really right at the time to go that far from DC, because my father had passed just shortly before that. So I wasn't a kid that had that much together that I needed to be that far away. I needed to have my older brother or my mom come snatch me if I was bugging out, you know. So but that, I mean, I think I really had some of the best that way, you know, and they all were great educators as well as great players, and so they instilled that in me. I don't think everybody kind of gets that. They just see you where you are for now, but they don't know the journey as to what it took for you to get there, and to even provide information and moral support, mentoring, and you know, it's taken a lot. Although I've been teaching saxophone lessons since I was 16 years old, um, it's nothing like that education I got from those jazz luminaries, those legends, and all the bandstands you're on with people. I mean, honestly, man, I learned this from Kenny Garrett. He looks at all the people he played with as his teachers,
Mm.
and speaking of Roy, even though I'm a couple months older than Roy, I looked at him as a teacher too, because Roy was just so good at an early age and developed so much that he was ahead of most of us, and he understood, and he was around things before most of us. So the benefit of being there and then bringing my skill set from all the stuff I had acquired, I'm sure he learned from everybody else that was around him too, but like to witness his process was a schooling in itself, and you gotta be humble enough to admit that, man. You just gotta just say, I can learn from anybody, you know. Sometimes, just hearing little kids trying to play, like that what's that commercial? It's that what's that commercial? It's like a little mini orchestra and the kids are playing and they sound so out of tune. And the person like closes the windows up on the car. I think so it's quiet now. But you gotta think about, what do you learn from that environment?
Mm,
What can you get from that environment? Just hearing them go for it, because they're gonna get it. Eventually, they're gonna figure it out.
absolutely.
But having like the patience and being humble enough to allow it to happen without being annoyed, you can learn from anybody, man. I learn from my kids. I learn from my students. On the bandstand. I, I'm just so shocked and amazed every time I hear something. It's like I'm like, whoa! I turn into a little kid again. Wow, did you hear that? Wow, that was killer. And like, what can you take from that experience? You know, as an educator, you have to stay as open as possible to new information and even things you don't like. And that goes right to being a player. Sometimes you have to examine and do things you don't like, because you never know. You might have to get in where you fit in, or even, move to another side of the table to experience some other things. You got to be willing to sound bad in order to sound good.
Mm. Man, beautifully said, brother. We learn through our life experiences.
All day, every day,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah. Wow, man. I just want to say, man, thank you, man. Just thank you so much, bro, because you've literally just imparted like jewels upon jewels upon jewels upon jewels of information that people can come here and really find a lot of resource. And so I just want to say thank you for like spending this time with us
No
here,
problem.
and we definitely want to get some more in terms of we want to do eventually like a group vibe. I know Willie Jones and Justin has already been on. Probably we could do something with y'all as well.
Right.
We have a few ideas that we can definitely incorporate, man. I think it would be a great vibe.
Right. I
You know.
appreciate it. I appreciate it because it's important that people tell their story without the aid of commercial media,
Mm,
because everybody has something to say. If you just look at like the typical old like Penguin Jazz Guide or something like that, there's so many people mentioned, but so many people left out because you'd have too much paper to fill, you know. But you can't make it like only a few people are contributors. There's a lot of contributors. There's a
mm,
lot of people that have things to say and perspective on life and things like that. You got to open it up, man. And like stuff like this, I got a homeboy that's doing something kind of similar with interviews, Antonio Parker down at DC. He's
mm.
doing like little different interviews and stuff. We need these things. Talking about who's in the shed, what are you shedding, what's your perspective on this, that, and the other thing, because it may help somebody that really never thought about certain things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Oh man. Whew. Letting all that sink in, man. I'm letting all that sink in.
It's all good.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, man, yeah, man. I think that's a good place to cap it, man. And as you know, I sent you. Let me try again. Let's see. I sent you a link by text. Sorry.
Yes.
Wait. Not that one. I got you again.
Yes, I just got it.
Yeah, not that one though, because it's a similar link, but not that one. Yeah, I thought I'd just set it up for you because I had to do this with Ben Wolf too when we did it.
Okay.
Uh, Copy link. This one I'm about to send you now is actually the right one. You see that one?
Join the In the Shed live Discord.
Perfect. You might need to download that app. It's just like a quick download.
Okay. All right.
Perfect.
I'll try to get to it today or tomorrow, brother.
Hey man, I just appreciate it, man. Once again, man, and you know, we'll be rapping, as you know, we're always on the phone. And I
Yeah.
come back on Saturday, so maybe I can catch that Buster.
Send me a text, man. Try to get you to come on through, you know.
Hey man, I appreciate that. Yeah.
Buster Williams, me, George Colligan, Stephon Harris, and Lenny White.
Oh, Saffron is there? Oh my God, that's gonna be amazing.
What
Yeah.
days are that again?
Tonight through Sunday.
Got you.
Killing. I'll be there, man. I mean, I'll let you know because I have to literally book my flights.
Yeah, you can always swim over.
Watch your, you know, the sharks out there, you know.
I know.
Bring a net with you.
All right, cats. Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, man, you already know.
All right now. Talk to you
Yeah.
guys.
Peace.